I moved to my farm for one reason: peace. No neighbors, no HOA rules, just my land. But then she came, the HOA president, from a neighborhood I wasn't even part of, demanding control over my property. At first, it was just nosy questions. Then, the real nightmare began. When I refused to let her in, she snapped. And what she did next, it was beyond insane. How far would you go to protect what's yours? When I first moved in, I thought I had finally escaped the chaos of city life. My farm was perfect: rolling fields, fresh air, and most importantly, total privacy. No noisy neighbors, no HOA rules, just me and my land. But then, Karen appeared. It was my first week in the new house. I was unloading the last of my moving boxes when I heard a voice behind me. "Oh, hi there. You must be the new neighbor." I turned around to see a middle-aged woman standing at the edge of my driveway. She was dressed way too formally for a casual visit. Crisp blouse, pearl earrings, and an overly enthusiastic smile that immediately felt fake. "I'm Karen," she said, stepping closer and extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I'm the president of the HOA in the neighborhood just over there." She pointed toward a row of identical, cookie-cutter houses in the distance, at least half a mile away. I frowned slightly but shook her hand. "Nice to meet you, but I'm not actually part of the HOA." Her smile barely faltered, but her eyes flickered with something. Annoyance? Frustration? I couldn't quite tell. "Oh, of course not," she said, her tone overly sweet. "But, we like to keep the area looking nice. It's important to maintain a certain aesthetic." I raised an eyebrow. "Right, but I'm not in your neighborhood." She let out a little nervous laugh, waving a hand dismissively. "Oh, of course, of course. I just wanted to stop by and welcome you." There was a moment of silence. She didn't move, didn't turn to leave, just stood there, still smiling, eyes scanning my property. Finally, she spoke again, her voice dropping just slightly. "It's always good to be a good neighbor." Something about the way she said it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I forced a polite smile and nodded. "Yeah, I agree." She lingered for another second, like she was expecting me to invite her inside or ask more questions. When I didn't, she finally took a step back. "Well, if you ever need anything, the HOA is always here to help." With that, she turned and walked away, heading back toward her neighborhood. I watched her leave, something uneasy settling in my stomach. It was just a friendly visit, right? At the time, I shrugged it off. But looking back, that was my first mistake. At first, I convinced myself Karen's visit was just a friendly introduction. But that illusion shattered just a few weeks later. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, and I was outside working on my front gate. The metal frame had rusted over the years, and I wanted to restore it. As I brushed away the loose paint, I heard the unmistakable crunch of gravel behind me. I turned around, and there she was again, Karen. This time, she wasn't empty-handed. She held a plate of neatly arranged cookies, her smile just as wide, just as fake. "I thought I'd bring you these," she chirped, handing them over. A little welcome gift. I thanked her, though something about her presence felt off. She lingered, glancing at the gate I was repairing. Then, in that same sweet voice, she casually asked, "Why do you keep it locked?" I frowned. "Because it's private property." Her smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second, before she recovered. "Oh, of course, of course. It's just such a beautiful piece of land. It's the kind of place people would love to take a walk through. As good neighbors." There was again that phrase. I forced a polite chuckle. "I like my space," I said, hoping to end the conversation. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't happy with my answer. Before she left, she added, "If you ever want to make improvements to the property, the HOA has resources. We're always here to help. I didn't think much of it at the time. Karen was pushy, sure, but I figured that was just her personality. I had no idea this was only the beginning. For a while, I thought Karen had finally given up. Weeks passed without another visit, and I focused on my work, fixing up the house, maintaining the land, and enjoying the quiet. Then one evening, something strange caught my attention. I had installed a security camera near my gate for peace of mind, but I rarely checked the footage. That night, however, I decided to take a look. What I saw made my stomach drop. Karen was back. She stood outside my gate, clipboard in hand, jotting something down. She wasn't knocking, wasn't trying to talk to me, just standing there, staring at my land, writing. Every few seconds, she glanced around, as if making sure no one was watching. It was unsettling, but I told myself maybe she was just documenting something for the HOA. I had no idea what was coming next. The following weekend, I was out back clearing some brush near the tree line when I heard voices. At first, I assumed they were coming from the road, but as I walked closer, I froze. Two strangers were inside my property. They were strolling along the field, pointing at things, chatting as if they were on a guided tour. "Excuse me," I called out, walking toward them. They jumped, clearly startled, before one of them, a woman in her 40s, stammered, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Karen said it would be fine." I blinked. "Karen said what?" The woman hesitated, but then continued. "She told us this was part of the neighborhood and that it was open to residents. We just wanted to take a quick look." I clenched my jaw, my hands tightening into fists. Karen had told people they could enter my land. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "This is private property," I said firmly. "Karen has no authority here. Please leave." They apologized again and hurried off, but I was left with more questions than answers. Why was Karen telling people my farm was part of the neighborhood? Was this some kind of misunderstanding? Or was she planning something bigger? I needed answers. The next day, I went straight to the HOA office to confront her. When she saw me, her usual fake smile appeared, but there was something behind her eyes, nervousness. I wasted no time. "Why are you telling people my land is part of the neighborhood?" She blinked, acting confused. "Oh, that must have been a misunderstanding. I may have mentioned your property in passing, but I never told anyone they could go in." She was lying. I could hear it in her voice. But without proof, what could I do? I let it go, for the moment. As I turned to leave, she added, "You know, if you ever want to join the HOA, we'd be happy to have you. It would make things so much simpler." That was when I knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. Karen wasn't just being nosy. She was trying to take control of my land. I left the HOA office that day knowing one thing for certain: Karen wasn't done. At first, everything was quiet. Too quiet. No more uninvited guests on my land. No more fake smiles from Karen. For a brief moment, I let myself believe that confronting her had worked. Then the letter arrived. I found it in my mailbox one morning, tucked between my usual bills. It was from the HOA with an official-looking header. The first line made my stomach drop. "We've noticed that your property is not currently in compliance with HOA guidelines." I read it twice, 3 times. I wasn't even part of the HOA. How could I be out of compliance with rules that didn't apply to me? The letter listed vague infractions: my fence, the condition of my land, even the fact that my property was inaccessible to the community. It ended with a thinly veiled threat, suggesting that non-compliance could lead to further action. I was furious. I wasn't about to let Karen intimidate me. I called the HOA office immediately, demanding an explanation. The woman on the phone hesitated before saying, "I don't know much about this, but maybe you should speak to the president." I hung up. No, I wasn't going to speak to Karen. I was going to fight back. But before I could do anything, another letter arrived. This time, it wasn't just a warning. It was a petition, a formal request signed by dozens of residents asking that I allow limited community access to my property. The wording was slick, manipulative. It made it sound like I was being unfair, selfish, for keeping my own land private. And at the bottom, a long list of names. And Karen's signature at the top. I couldn't believe it. She had actually convinced people my land was part of some community resource, something I was obligated to share. I should have laughed at the absurdity. But then, things started happening. Trash. At first, it was just a few empty wrappers near my gate. Then it was entire garbage bags dumped inside my fence line. Next, tire tracks, deep, fresh ones, appeared near the back of my property. My security cameras never caught a vehicle, but the tracks were there. Then came the worst part. I had been growing tomatoes in a small garden near the tree line. One morning, I went to check on them, and the plants were completely trampled. At first, I thought it was an animal, but there were no hoof prints, no signs of deer or any other wildlife, just a straight path of destruction, as if someone had stomped through it deliberately. Someone was sending a message, and I knew exactly who was behind it. The final straw came a few nights later. I was walking the property, checking the perimeter, when I saw something glinting in the dirt near the back fence. A piece of paper. I picked it up, unfolding it with shaking hands. It was wet, muddy, but still readable. An official notice from the HOA. This one was different from the petition. It was an enforcement letter, stating that my fence was in violation of community standards and was encroaching on HOA land. It demanded that I remove the fence immediately or face further consequences. I couldn't believe it. Not only was I not in the HOA, but I had checked the property lines when I bought the farm. My fence was well within my boundaries. But now, they were trying to rewrite reality. Karen had escalated. She wasn't just harassing me. She was trying to steal my land. That night, I didn't sleep because I knew this wasn't over. It was just the beginning. I knew Karen was behind everything. The trespassers, the letters, the petition, it all pointed back to her. But I still didn't know why. Then I found out. I had been holding on to the HOA's violation notice for days, wondering what to do next. I knew my fence wasn't on HOA land. But something about that letter felt too confident. It was almost as if they actually believed it. So I decided to get proof. I called a licensed surveyor to recheck my property lines. When the results came in, I expected them to confirm what I already knew, that my fence was well within my boundaries. But what I found was even more shocking. The HOA wasn't just wrong. They had accidentally built part of their neighborhood on MY land, a decorative row of bushes, and a fancy sign marking their subdivision. They weren't on HOA property. They were on mine. That's when I realized. Karen wasn't just trying to enforce rules. She was trying to cover up a mistake. But it didn't end there. That same day, another letter arrived. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was from a lawyer. An official document claiming that my land was subject to pending annexation into the HOA. Annexation. I had to read the word 3 times before it truly hit me. Karen had filed a formal request to the city. She was trying to claim my land as part of the HOA, my privately owned farm. She had taken photos of my property without my permission. She had submitted fabricated complaints, claiming my farm was an eyesore. She had even included fake letters from residents supporting the move. And the worst part? The city council was scheduled to vote on it in just 2 weeks. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what would happen if Karen won. If the city approved her request, I would be forced into the HOA, forced to follow their rules, restrictions, and fees, forced to give up my privacy. And I had zero say in the matter. I needed to act fast. I called my own lawyer first thing the next morning, explaining the situation. He was stunned. "This is fraud," he said. "They can't just take your land. But the problem was, the council didn't know that. They were working off Karen's lies, and I had 2 weeks to stop them. So I made a plan. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to expose everything. I had 2 weeks to stop Karen, 2 weeks before the city council voted on her fraudulent annexation request. So I did what she never expected. I went public. I gathered every piece of evidence I had, security footage of trespassers, photos of Karen lurking outside my gate, the HOA letters, and the annexation request. Then I posted everything online. I tagged local community groups, news outlets, and even the HOA's own Facebook page. The title? The HOA president who tried to steal my farm. The response was instant. Neighbors I had never even met reached out to apologize for Karen's actions. Some admitted they had been tricked into signing the petition, thinking it was just a formality. But the real firestorm started when the HOA board found out. Karen had kept them in the dark. She had lied to her own board members, using HOA funds to pay for legal fees, surveys, and even landscaping meant to make my land blend into the neighborhood. The board turned against her immediately. That same week, I received a call from a man named Dave, an HOA board member. His voice was shaking with frustration. "Listen, we had no idea what she was doing. She told us you were a problem neighbor. She made it seem like we had legal ground to take your property." I could barely believe what I was hearing. Karen had been running her own personal campaign against me, feeding lies to her HOA. Then the city council got involved. With all the public backlash, they couldn't ignore my case. I was invited to present my side at the hearing. And when the day came, I walked in with my lawyer, my surveyor's report, and my evidence. Karen, she walked in alone. She tried to defend herself, but the council saw right through her. They questioned her about the fabricated complaints, the forged letters of support, the unauthorized spending of HOA funds. She had nothing. And then came the final blow. The surveyor's report not only proved my fence was within my property, but it revealed something far worse for her. The HOA's own landscaping and signage were on my land. The council ruled in my favor unanimously. Karen's annexation request was denied. But it didn't stop there. The HOA board launched an internal investigation into Karen's misuse of funds. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse for her, she was caught on my security cameras one last time. That night, she tried to tear down my no trespassing signs with a pair of bolt cutters. I called the sheriff immediately. By the time the police arrived, she was still standing there red-handed. She tried to play the victim, but the deputies weren't buying it. She was cited for trespassing and property damage. Karen was done. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was brutal. Karen was forced to resign as HOA president. The landscaping the HOA had illegally placed on my land, removed. The city council formally rejected any future annexation attempts. And Karen, she disappeared. Neighbors whispered that she sold her house and left town. The HOA, desperate to recover its reputation, tried to make peace with me. They even offered to cover my legal fees. I declined. I didn't want their money. I just wanted my peace. And finally, after everything, I had it. No more HOA letters. No more trespassers. No more Karen. Some people think they can take whatever they want. Until they meet the one person who fights back. Would you have done the same?